I woke up to silence, the kind that screams something is wrong. I walked to the guest room and found the antique chest wide open, the leather bag gone. On the pillow, a note in my daughter's handwriting. "Thanks, Mom. We can live our dreams now. $20 million, my life savings, my dream house, gone. I should have collapsed. Called the police. Cried. Instead, I laughed until tears ran down my face, because that bag didn't contain my fortune. It contained evidence in a federal fraud case. They just stole their own prison sentence. Let me back up and explain how I got here. My name is Tara, and I'm 65 years old. For 40 years, I worked as a forensic accountant for insurance companies, tracking down fraud, following money trails, exposing liars. I was good at my job. Really good. I retired 3 years ago, after my husband Gerald died suddenly from a heart attack. He was only 67. One minute he was reading the newspaper at breakfast, the next minute he was gone. Just like that. Gerald had built a successful medical device company over 30 years. When he died, he left me $23 million. It was more money than I ever imagined having. We'd lived comfortably, but we were never flashy. We had a nice house in a good neighborhood, took vacations, saved responsibly. The business had been his passion, and it paid off. We had 2 children. Marcus, who's 42 now, lives in Arizona with his 2 kids. He's an IT specialist, divorced 3 years ago, and he's been the primary parent ever since. Good man, responsible. We talk every week. Then there's Bryn. She's 38, and she's been a problem since she was a teenager. I hate saying that about my own daughter, but it's the truth. Bryn married Derek 12 years ago. He's 41, works in real estate, or at least that's what he claims. From the day they got married, they've had their hands out. Always needing money, always having some crisis, some emergency that only cash could solve. 5 years into their marriage, they came to us needing $200,000 for a business venture. Derek had some scheme involving flipping houses. Gerald, always too soft-hearted when it came to Bryn, gave them the money. The business failed within 8 months. We never saw a dime of it back. Then it was $50,000 for IVF treatments. Bryn said they desperately wanted children, that this was their last chance at starting a family. Gerald wrote the check. 3 months later, I saw photos on social media of them on a new boat. $50,000 worth of boat. No baby, just a boat. It went on like that for years. Always something. Always an excuse. Always their hands out. After Gerald died and they found out about the inheritance, it got worse. They started dropping hints about how they deserved an early inheritance, how they had plans and dreams, how waiting until I died wasn't fair when I had so much money just sitting there. 6 months ago, I caught them trying to forge my signature on a power of attorney document. They'd brought it over during what I thought was a friendly visit, tried to get me to sign it while I was distracted. When I actually read it, I realized they were trying to get legal control over my finances. I confronted them right there in my kitchen. The fight was ugly. Derek claimed it was just for my protection, in case something happened to me. Bryn cried and said they just wanted to help me manage my money. But I'd spent 40 years as a forensic accountant. I knew exactly what they were doing. I told them to get out. I told them they'd get their inheritance when I died, not a moment before. I told them if they ever tried something like that again, I'd cut them out entirely. We didn't speak for months after that. No calls, no visits, nothing. Then, 3 months ago, 2 FBI agents showed up at my door. Their names were Morrison and Walsh. They showed me their credentials and asked if they could come in. My heart was pounding. You never expect the FBI at your door, no matter how clean your life is. They told me about Frank Holloway. Frank had been Gerald's business partner in the medical device company. After Gerald died, Frank had taken over operations. Apparently, Frank had been embezzling millions, over $30 million, stolen using forged signatures and false documents, and he'd been using Gerald's credentials to do it. Gerald's name, Gerald's authority, Gerald's reputation, all used to commit fraud after Gerald was dead and couldn't defend himself. I was horrified. Gerald had been an honest man. The idea of his name being connected to fraud made me sick. But the FBI had a plan. They wanted to catch Frank in the act, get irrefutable evidence. They asked if I'd be willing to help. They'd give me $20 million in cash, specially prepared bills that could be tracked. I was supposed to keep the money at my house, let it be known I had cash on hand. Frank had been sniffing around my finances, trying to access Gerald's old accounts. The FBI believed he'd try to steal or extort the money from me. When he did, they'd arrest him. I agreed immediately. I wanted Frank caught. I wanted Gerald's name cleared. 2 weeks ago, everything changed. Bryn called me out of the blue. Suddenly friendly, suddenly apologetic. She wanted to reconnect. She said she'd been thinking about our fight, and she realized she'd been wrong. She wanted to repair our relationship. I was cautious, but I wanted to believe her. She's my daughter. During that conversation, I mentioned casually that I'd withdrawn a large amount of cash to pay contractors for renovations on my house. I said I was tired of bank delays and wire transfer fees. I wanted to pay cash and be done with it. Bryn's interest sharpened immediately. She asked where I was keeping such a large amount. How much was it exactly? Was I sure it was safe? The questions came too fast, too eager. That's when I knew. Somehow, she knew about the money. Maybe she had a contact at the bank. Maybe she'd been monitoring my accounts illegally. I didn't know how, but she knew. So I set my own trap. I put the FBI's $20 million in an old leather bag and placed it in the antique chest in my guest room. Then I invited Bryn and Derek for the weekend. I made a big show of hiding the bag, even left the chest key in an obvious spot on the dresser. I wanted to see what they'd do. They came Friday evening. We had dinner. We talked. They were charming, attentive, everything they used to be when they wanted something. Saturday, we went shopping. Sunday morning, I woke up to that terrible silence. The chest was open, the bag was gone, and the note, "Thanks, Mom. We can live our dreams now." I called Agent Morrison immediately. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from satisfaction. Let them try to spend marked bills. They'd be arrested within hours. This would teach Bryn a lesson she'd never forget. Agent Morrison arrived 30 minutes later, but he wasn't smiling. He looked grim, worried. He sat me down at my kitchen table and explained there was a serious problem. The $20 million he'd given me wasn't all marked bills. To make the operation look authentic, the FBI had mixed in clean bills. 10 million were marked, tracked, every serial number recorded. But 10 million were completely clean, unmarked, untraceable. Regular currency. They'd assumed I would keep it all together until the sting operation. They never imagined someone would steal it and sort through the bills. But that morning, international wire transfers had started clearing. $11 million moved from a Grand Cayman account into accounts in Singapore and Switzerland. Someone had gone through the 20 million, identified which bills were clean, and wired only those funds overseas. The marked bills were sitting untouched in a hotel room in Dallas, where Bryn and Derek had apparently spent the night before fleeing. Agent Morrison looked at me with new suspicion. How did Bryn know which bills were marked and which weren't? That information was classified. Only FBI personnel knew the serial numbers. Only agents involved in the operation knew which bills were clean. I protested. I had no idea. I never told her anything about marked bills. I didn't even know there were clean bills mixed in. But Morrison wasn't convinced. I was the only civilian who knew about the operation. I was the connection between Bryn and the FBI. The questions got harder. Had I told her about the marked bills? Had I given her the serial numbers? Was I working with her? My denials meant nothing. Within 2 hours, my assets were frozen pending investigation. All $23 million. Frozen. Inaccessible. I couldn't pay bills. Couldn't hire a lawyer. Couldn't do anything. Agent Morrison left my house that afternoon with a final warning. I was now under investigation for obstruction of justice. If they determined I'd tipped off Bryn or helped her in any way, I'd face federal charges. I sat in my house that night, alone, and realized my plan had backfired completely. I'd tried to trap my daughter, and instead, I'd trapped myself. The next 72 hours were a nightmare. FBI agents came back twice more, asking the same questions over and over. Where was Bryn? How did she know about the marked bills? What had I told her? I gave them the same answers each time. I didn't know. I hadn't told her anything. I had no idea how she'd figured it out, but I could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe me. I called my attorney, Patrick Brennan. I'd known Patrick for 15 years. He'd handled Gerald's estate, our wills, all our legal matters. He was a good lawyer and a good man. When I explained what was happening, his normally calm voice took on an edge of worry. Tara, this is serious. Federal obstruction charges carry real prison time. We need to figure out how Bryn knew about those bills. I spent the next week digging into Derek's background. If there was a leak, it had to come from somewhere. That's when I found it. Derek's cousin, Jordan Hayes, worked for the FBI. Specifically, in the Documents and Evidence Unit of the Dallas Field Office. It had to be Jordan. Derek must have called him, asked questions, gotten information about how the FBI marks bills for sting operations. Maybe Jordan didn't realize what he was revealing. Maybe Derek tricked the information out of him. But that had to be the connection. I called Agent Morrison immediately. I gave him Jordan's name, his relationship to Derek, his position at the FBI. Morrison promised to investigate. For 3 days I felt hope. I'd solved it. I'd found the leak. They'd clear me and go after Jordan and Derek instead. Then Morrison called me back. Jordan Hayes had been investigated thoroughly. He had an airtight alibi. During the entire week the marked bills were prepared and distributed to me. Jordan had been on vacation in Hawaii. His security clearance logs proved he hadn't accessed any case files about Frank Holloway or the sting operation. His computer login records showed no remote access. The FBI interviewed him extensively. Jordan didn't know anything about the operation. He'd never spoken to Derek about marked bills or FBI procedures. Jordan was completely innocent. I felt the ground drop out from under me. If it wasn't Jordan, then how? But Morrison wasn't finished. While investigating Jordan, the FBI had done a complete financial background check on me. They were looking for any other possible leaks or connections, and they found something I didn't know existed. 3 years ago, right before Gerald died, he'd established an irrevocable trust fund for Bryn worth $5 million. The trust was set up through an offshore attorney in the Bahamas, very discreet, very private. I'd never heard of it. Gerald never mentioned it. I'd found no records of it when settling his estate. But it existed, and I was listed as the contingent beneficiary, meaning I'd inherit the trust if Bryn died. The problem was this. When Frank's fraud case first opened, the FBI had asked me to file for victim compensation. They wanted to establish that Gerald and I had been completely victimized by Frank's embezzlement. As part of that process, I'd signed documents under oath stating that I knew of no hidden assets, no offshore accounts, no secret trusts involving Gerald's money. I'd declared, under penalty of perjury, that everything was disclosed. But this trust existed. Either Gerald had hidden it from me, or I'd lied about knowing it existed. Morrison showed me copies of my sworn statements. Then he showed me the trust documents with Gerald's signature and my name as contingent beneficiary. You committed perjury, Mrs. Sullivan. You made false statements to federal investigators. That's a felony. I tried to explain. I'd never heard of this trust. Gerald must have set it up without telling me. I swear I didn't know. But Morrison wasn't interested in my explanations. The FBI believed I'd known about the trust all along. They thought I'd lied to position myself as a victim in Frank's fraud case, possibly to claim victim compensation I wasn't entitled to. Now they suspected I'd been planning some kind of insurance fraud or financial scheme. And maybe, just maybe, I'd conspired with Bryn to steal the $20 million and split it. Patrick came to my house that evening. His face was pale. Tara, they're filing formal charges, obstruction of justice, and making false statements to federal agents. You need to prepare yourself. You could be looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison. The arraignment was scheduled for the following week. The bail hearing right after. Patrick thought he could get me released on bail, but it would be expensive. Probably $500,000. I had $23 million in assets, but every penny was frozen. I couldn't access any of it. I had maybe $30,000 in a checking account that wasn't frozen. That was it. Patrick helped me arrange a bail bondsman and got the court to allow me to borrow against my frozen assets to pay the bond. It took every favor he had, but he made it happen. I was formally charged on a Thursday morning. The charges were read in federal court. Obstruction of justice, making false statements to a federal agent. I stood there in front of the judge, 65 years old, and heard myself described as a criminal. Bail was set at $500,000. I made bail and went home. But that was just the beginning of how bad things got. The local newspaper got hold of the story within 24 hours. The headline read, "Wealthy Widow Charged in FBI Fraud Investigation." They printed my name. They printed my address. They described me as a suspect in a federal obstruction case involving millions of dollars. My phone started ringing. Reporters wanted comments. Neighbors wanted explanations. My country club wanted a conversation. The country club called first. I'd been a member of Lakewood Country Club for 20 years. Gerald and I had joined when his business took off. We'd made friends there, played golf, attended charity events. It was part of our community. The club president, a woman named Helen Patterson, who I'd known for a decade, called me 3 days after my arraignment. Her voice was stiff, formal, nothing like the friendly tone she'd always used before. "Tara, the board held an emergency meeting. Given the criminal charges against you, we've decided to revoke your membership. It's in the club's bylaws. Members facing serious criminal charges can be removed. I'm sorry, but the decision is final." Just like that, 20 years of membership, gone. My financial advisor called next. His name was Charles Roth. I'd worked with him for 12 years, trusted him with my retirement planning, my estate planning, everything. Charles had always been warm, personable, enthusiastic about helping me manage my money. Now his voice was cold. "Tara, my firm has a policy. We cannot represent clients under federal indictment. It's a liability issue. I'm going to have to transfer your accounts to another advisor." "I'm sorry." 3 of my closest friends stopped returning my calls. Women I'd known for 15 years. We'd had dinner together every month. We'd traveled together, celebrated birthdays and holidays, mourned Gerald's death together. Now, nothing. Calls went to voicemail. Texts went unanswered. One friend, Susan, finally called me back. I could hear the discomfort in her voice. "Tara, I'm sorry, but I can't be involved in this. My husband's business depends on his reputation in this town. If people see me associating with you right now, it could hurt him. You understand, don't you?" I understood. I understood perfectly. When you're accused of something, people assume you're guilty. It doesn't matter if you haven't been convicted. It doesn't matter if you're innocent. The accusation is enough. My bridge club uninvited me. We'd played together every Tuesday afternoon for 8 years. 4 women, rotating hosts, playing bridge and drinking wine, and talking about our lives. Now they sent me a group text. "We think it's best if you don't come to bridge for a while, until this legal situation is resolved." I went to the grocery store on a Saturday morning. I was in the produce section, picking out tomatoes, when I heard 2 women talking behind me. Their voices weren't quiet. "That's her. That's the woman who defrauded the FBI. I heard she stole millions. From her own daughter, can you imagine? Some people have no shame. Walking around like nothing happened." I turned around. They were staring right at me. When our eyes met, they didn't even look embarrassed. They just kept staring, judging, whispering. I left my cart and walked out. I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried. But I couldn't fall apart. I had to fight. Patrick was working on my defense. He'd located Gerald's estate attorney, a man named Harold Whitmore who'd handled the trust setup. Harold was willing to testify that Gerald had set up the trust without my knowledge. He had notes from meetings with Gerald where Gerald specifically said he didn't want me to know. Gerald had been ashamed that Bryn needed a trust fund. He thought it reflected poorly on their parenting. Harold's testimony would prove I didn't lie. I genuinely didn't know about the trust. Patrick was confident this testimony would get the perjury-related charges dropped. We'd still have to deal with the obstruction charge, but at least we'd eliminate one major problem. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks away. Harold agreed to testify. Patrick prepared his questions. We had a strategy. We had hope. I let myself believe maybe this nightmare would end. Maybe I'd be cleared. Maybe my life would go back to normal. Then, 2 days before the hearing, Bryn uploaded a video. It appeared on YouTube first, then Facebook, then Instagram, then everywhere. The title was, "My Mother's Abuse, The Truth About Tara Sullivan." I got a call from Marcus. "Mom, you need to see this." Bryn posted something. "It's bad." I pulled up the video on my laptop. The thumbnail showed Bryn's face, tear-streaked, devastated. I clicked play. The video was 23 minutes long, professionally edited, well-lit, planned. Bryn sat in front of the camera, crying, telling a story I didn't recognize. She described years of alleged emotional and physical abuse. She showed photographs of herself with bruises, claiming I'd hit her. I remembered those photos. They were from a skiing accident when she was 32. She'd fallen on an icy slope and bruised her arms and legs. But in the video, she presented them as evidence of abuse. She showed text messages I'd sent her over the years, taken completely out of context. Messages where I'd set boundaries looked like threats. Messages where I'd said no to giving her money looked like emotional manipulation. She showed a page from what she claimed was her teenage journal. The entry described me hitting her, screaming at her, telling her she was worthless. I'd never done any of those things. That journal page had to be forged, but it looked real on camera. Derek appeared beside her. He put his arm around her shoulders and spoke directly to the camera. "I've witnessed Tara's controlling behavior for years. She threatened to disinherit Bryn completely if we didn't cut off contact with my family. She wanted total control over our lives. When we refused, she turned on us." Bryn continued, sobbing. "We only took the money because we were scared. My mom was under FBI investigation. We thought if she'd defraud the FBI, what would she do to us? We feared for our safety. We just wanted to get away, to be safe." The video ended with Bryn looking directly into the camera. "I just want people to know the truth. My mother isn't a victim. She's an abuser who's finally being held accountable. I'm not proud of taking that money, but I'm not going to be her victim anymore." The video went viral. 200,000 views in 6 hours. By the next morning, it had 1 million views. Local news stations picked it up. The headlines changed. "Fraud suspect's daughter claims years of abuse." The comment sections exploded. Thousands of people I'd never met called me a monster. They said I deserved prison. They said I was an abuser hiding behind money and privilege. They said Bryn was brave for speaking out. Someone found my address online and posted it publicly. That night, at 2 a.m, a brick came through my front window. Glass shattered across my living room floor. I called the police. They came, took a report, said there was nothing they could do without witnesses. The next morning, I woke up to find my garage door spray painted with red words, "Elder Abuser." I stood in my driveway at 7 a.m, still in my pajamas, staring at those words. My neighbor Jim, who'd lived next door for 12 years, came out to get his newspaper. He looked at me. He looked at the garage. Then he turned around and went back inside without saying a word. Another neighbor, Carol, actually crossed the street to avoid walking past my house. Patrick called that afternoon. His voice was tight. "Tara, the judge has seen the video. He's requiring a full psychological evaluation before the hearing. This delays everything by at least 3 weeks. And if the evaluation finds anything concerning, Your bail could be revoked. But the video is full of lies. Those photos are from a skiing accident. That journal entry is forged. Patrick, you know me. You've known me for 15 years. You know I never abused her. I believe you, Tara. But the judge doesn't know you, and public opinion has turned completely against you. We need that psychological evaluation to come back clean, and we need to be prepared for this to get worse before it gets better. He paused. There's something else. Bryn has filed a civil lawsuit. She's suing you for damages related to the alleged abuse. She's asking for $2 million. I hung up the phone and sat in my destroyed living room, staring at the plywood someone had nailed over my broken window. My life was falling apart. Every time I tried to fix something, it got worse. Every time I thought I'd found a solution, a new crisis appeared. I was 65 years old, facing federal charges, being sued by my own daughter, and painted as an abuser in front of the entire country. And I had no idea how to make it stop. The court-ordered psychological evaluation took place over 3 sessions with a psychologist named Dr. Amanda Schultz. She worked for the court system, evaluating defendants to determine their mental state and credibility. Each session lasted 2 hours. Dr. Schultz asked invasive questions about my childhood, my marriage, my relationship with Bryn, my feelings about money and control. She gave me tests. She watched how I responded to certain questions. She took notes constantly. It was humiliating. I'd never been in therapy before. I'd always prided myself on being strong, capable, independent. Now I had to sit in this sterile office and answer questions like, do you think you have anger management issues? And have you ever struck your children? The evaluation concluded I had no mental health disorders, no personality disorders, no signs of abusive behavior. But the report noted I was under extreme stress and recommended family therapy to address the conflict with Bryn. That recommendation felt like an indictment. It implied there really were family problems, that maybe some of Bryn's claims had merit. While I waited for the hearing to be rescheduled, my life continued to collapse. I was now fighting 3 separate legal battles: the criminal charges for obstruction and false statements, Bryn's civil lawsuit for $2 million in abuse damages, and the underlying FBI investigation into Frank's fraud, which still hadn't been resolved. The legal fees were astronomical. Patrick needed another $75,000 to continue representing me. My previous attorney bills had been $180,000 in just 6 weeks. I was burning through money at a terrifying rate. My assets were still frozen. Every penny of my $23 million sat in accounts I couldn't touch. I had no income. I was retired. My only cash was what little I'd had in checking accounts before the freeze. Patrick helped me get court approval to access some frozen funds for legal expenses, but the process took weeks and the court limited how much I could withdraw. I had to account for every dollar. I couldn't afford to keep my house. The mortgage was $3,200 a month. Property taxes were another $9,000 a year. Insurance, maintenance, utilities. It was too much. I put the house on the market. It sold in 8 days. Nice neighborhood, well-maintained home, good schools nearby. But after paying off the mortgage and various liens, I netted only $400,000. That money went immediately to legal fees and living expenses. I moved out of the home I'd shared with Gerald for 30 years. I packed up 40 years of memories into boxes. The movers loaded everything into a truck while my neighbors watched from their windows. Nobody came out to say goodbye. Nobody offered to help. They just watched silently as I left. I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. The rent was $1,400 a month, less than half what my mortgage had been. The apartment was clean but generic. Beige walls, thin carpet, a view of the parking lot, nothing like my home. I unpacked slowly. Each box held memories, wedding photos, pictures of Bryn and Marcus as children, Gerald's favorite coffee mug, 40 years of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. The stress was destroying me physically. I developed heart palpitations. My heart would suddenly race, pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I'd get dizzy, short of breath. terrified I was having a heart attack. My regular doctor sent me to a cardiologist. Dr. Stevens ran tests, EKG, stress test, echocardiogram. The diagnosis was stress-induced arrhythmia. My heart was physically healthy, but the anxiety and stress were causing dangerous irregular heartbeats. Dr. Stevens was blunt. "Mrs. Sullivan, if you don't reduce your stress level, you're at serious risk for a heart attack. You need to find a way to manage this situation, or it's going to kill you." But how do you reduce stress when you're facing federal prison, being sued by your daughter, and watching your entire life burn down around you? I couldn't sleep more than 3 hours a night. I'd lie awake in my new apartment, listening to unfamiliar sounds, replaying everything that had gone wrong, every mistake, every moment where I could have done something differently. I lost 23 pounds in 2 months. Food had no taste. My clothes hung loose on my frame. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked a decade older than I had 6 months ago. My hair had more gray. My face was drawn and pale. My hands shook constantly. I was dying slowly, and I knew it. Then Marcus called. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something. Can I come visit?" He flew in from Arizona 2 days later. We met at my apartment. He looked worried when he saw me. "Mom, you look terrible. Are you eating?" "I'm fine," I lied. "What did you need to talk about?" He sat down on my secondhand couch. "I've been distant during all this. I wasn't sure what to think. Bryn's video was convincing, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Something felt wrong." "What do you mean?" "I'm an IT specialist, remember? I work with digital forensics. So I went back and watched Bryn's video frame by frame, and I found something." He pulled out his laptop and showed me. He'd paused the video on one of the journal entry pages Bryn had displayed. In the corner of the frame, for just a split second, you could see part of the computer screen Bryn was holding up. And on that screen, barely visible, was a document properties panel showing creation date metadata. Marcus had enhanced the image. The document had been created 3 weeks ago, not 15 years ago, when Bryn was a teenager. 3 weeks ago. It was forged, proof that Bryn had lied. We spent the next 2 days going through every piece of evidence Bryn had shown in her video. Marcus used his forensic software to analyze everything. We found 3 other forged documents. We found the original skiing accident photos in old family albums, proving the bruises weren't from abuse. We found text messages I'd sent that Bryn had edited, cutting out context to make them look threatening. We had proof, real, solid, technical proof that Bryn had lied. Patrick was ecstatic when we showed him. "This is it. This proves she's framing you. We can file this with the court, get the criminal charges dismissed, countersue for defamation." "Tara, this changes everything." For the first time in months, I felt hope. Real hope. The nightmare might actually end. Marcus and I celebrated quietly that night. Just dinner in my little apartment, pizza from a local place, but it felt like the first good meal I'd had in months. We talked about what would happen next, how we'd expose Bryn's lies, how I'd clear my name, maybe even rebuild my reputation. Marcus stayed with me that night, sleeping on my couch. I went to bed and actually slept for 5 hours straight, the best sleep I'd had in months. The next morning, Marcus got a phone call. His face went white as he listened. When he hung up, his hands were shaking. "Mom, that was my lawyer in Arizona. Sandra just filed for emergency custody modification." Sandra was his ex-wife. They'd been divorced for 3 years. Marcus had primary custody of their 2 kids, ages 8 and 11. Sandra had them every other weekend. "What? Why?" "She's claiming I'm under your manipulative control, that you're an abuser under federal investigation, that my judgment is compromised and I'm putting the kids at risk by allowing contact with you." He showed me the filing on his phone. Bryn filed a supporting affidavit. She provided all her abuse evidence to the family court. Derek filed one too, claiming he personally witnessed you being cruel to the kids. I felt sick. I've never been cruel to those children. I love them. "I know, Mom, but that's not all. Sandra's asking for immediate full custody. She wants to reduce me to supervised visitation only. And she wants a court order prohibiting any contact between you and the grandchildren. His lawyer had called because the hearing was scheduled for 48 hours away. The judge wanted to hear the case immediately because it involved child safety. Marcus sat down heavily on my couch. My lawyer says this is serious. The judge is going to see you're under federal indictment. He's going to see Bryn's video and affidavit. Even if we prove it's all lies later, right now, it looks really bad. He says if I want to protect my custody, I need to publicly distance myself from you. What does that mean? It means I can't help you with your case anymore. I can't be seen supporting you. I have to focus entirely on my kids and proving I'm a fit parent. Tears rolled down his face. Mom, if I keep helping you, I could lose my kids. They're my whole world. I've been their primary parent for 3 years. If Sandra gets custody, I'll barely see them. I understood immediately. This was Bryn's real attack. She knew Marcus and I had found evidence against her. So she went after his children. She knew he'd have to choose between helping me and protecting them. It was brilliant and evil. Marcus, you have to focus on your kids. I'll handle my own case. Go home. Fight for your children. Don't lose them because of me. But Mom, without my testimony and forensic analysis, how will you prove Bryn's evidence is forged? Patrick will figure something out. We'll hire another IT expert. We'll manage. But you need to go protect your kids. That's what matters. He cried. I cried. Then he packed his laptop and got a flight back to Arizona that afternoon. I called Patrick and told him what happened. There was a long silence on the phone. Tara, without Marcus's testimony, this is going to be much harder to prove. We can hire another expert, but it'll be expensive. And the defense loses credibility when it comes from a paid expert instead of your own son. I knew what he was saying. Our strongest evidence had just disappeared. And I'd told it to disappear because I couldn't let my grandson and granddaughter suffer for my fight. I sat alone in my apartment that night and realized I'd been backed into a corner with no good options. Help myself and hurt my grandchildren, or sacrifice my own defense to protect them. Every solution created a worse problem. Every move I made led to greater disaster. I was trapped. Patrick called 3 days later with news I'd been dreading. The prosecution had offered a plea deal. Plead guilty to obstruction of justice. Serve 18 months in minimum security federal prison. Pay a $500,000 fine. 5 years probation after release. In exchange, all other charges would be dropped. And Bryn had agreed to drop her civil lawsuit and withdraw her affidavit in Marcus's custody case. Patrick explained it carefully. Tara, I know you're innocent. I believe you. But the alternative is going to trial. That'll cost another $300,000 minimum. You'll have to testify. The jury will see Bryn's video. They'll hear about the forged trust. Even with our best case, it's maybe 50-50 odds of acquittal. If you lose at trial, you're looking at 5 to 8 years in a real federal prison, and Bryn keeps destroying Marcus's life. I had 1 week to decide. I sat in my apartment for days, unable to think clearly. I was 65 years old. My health was failing. I had maybe $300,000 left after legal fees. If I fought and lost, I'd die in prison. If I took the plea, I'd have a criminal record, serve time, but maybe salvage something. I was ready to give up, ready to call Patrick and accept the plea. At least then Marcus's kids would be safe. At least the nightmare would have an end date. It was the 6th day, late at night, when I received an email. The sender was listed as a friend. The email address was anonymous, probably created just to contact me. The subject line read, "Your daughter isn't who you think she is." The message was short. Bryn isn't in Costa Rica. She's in Dallas. Meeting with Frank Holloway tomorrow, noon, Hilton downtown, room 847. She's not a victim. She's his partner. Thought you should know. I stared at the email for a long time. Frank Holloway, Gerald's business partner. The man being investigated for embezzling $30 million using Gerald's name. Why would Bryn be meeting with Frank? I was too weak to travel. Dr. Stevens had told me not to fly. My heart couldn't take the stress. I had less than $50,000 left to my name, but I couldn't ignore this. I called Marcus. I know you have to focus on your custody case. I understand, but I just got an anonymous email. It says Bryn is meeting Frank Holloway in Dallas tomorrow at noon. Can you go? Can you take photos? Find out what she's doing? There was a long pause. Mom, my custody hearing is in 3 days. If I'm caught investigating your case, it'll make things worse. I know I'm asking too much. But Marcus, this might be the only chance to find out what Bryn's really doing. Please, he sighed. I'll go. I'll take photos. But Mom, this is the last thing I can do. After this, I have to focus entirely on my kids. He flew to Dallas the next morning. He texted me when he arrived at the Hilton downtown. He found room 847 and waited in the hallway with his camera. I sat by my phone, anxious, hoping this would somehow lead to answers. Marcus called 40 minutes later. Mom, I got photos. Bryn and Frank were definitely meeting. They were in there for about 30 minutes. Then they left separately. I followed them both to the parking garage and got photos of them together. He emailed the photos immediately. I opened them on my laptop. There was Bryn, looking healthy and confident, nothing like the crying victim from her video. And there was Frank Holloway, a man I'd only seen in photographs, tall and silver-haired, and expensively dressed. But it was the second set of photos that caught my attention. Marcus had managed to get a shot through the partially open hotel room door. On a table between Bryn and Frank were documents, financial statements, contracts, papers spread everywhere. I zoomed in on the documents, my forensic accountant brain engaging for the first time in months. My blood ran cold. I recognized those documents. They were from Gerald's company, contracts I'd seen during the estate settlement, financial statements from the business. But these weren't copies. These were original documents. I could tell by the paper quality and the signatures. I enhanced another photo. I could read partial text from one document. Agree to split proceeds. Offshore accounts. Cayman Islands. And there, at the bottom, was Gerald's signature. His real signature, not a forgery. I'd seen it 1,000 times. I knew my husband's handwriting. My heart sank as I understood. These documents proved that Gerald hadn't been an innocent victim of Frank's fraud. They showed Gerald had been an active, willing participant. Gerald and Frank had set up offshore accounts together. They'd agreed to split the proceeds of fraudulent transactions. Gerald had been in on it the whole time. If these documents became public, everything would collapse. Gerald's reputation would be destroyed. His life insurance payout of $3 million would become void due to the fraud exclusion clause. The entire $23 million estate could be deemed proceeds of criminal activity and seized by the government. I could face new charges as a beneficiary of fraud proceeds, and any inheritance Marcus was counting on would disappear. My phone rang. Bryn's number. I answered. Hello? Hi, Mom. Her voice was cold, triumphant. I see Marcus was in Dallas. Did you enjoy what he found? Bryn, those documents. Are they real? Oh, they're real. Dad kept them in a safe deposit box I found after he died. You know what they prove? That Dad and Frank were partners. They were stealing millions together for years. You built your whole perfect life on dirty money, Mom. How does that feel? My voice shook. Why are you doing this? Because you owe me. You and Dad always treated me like I wasn't good enough. Marcus was the golden child, the responsible one, the one who got all the praise. I was just the disappointment, the one who always needed money, the one who couldn't get her life together. Well, now I have the power. Now I'm in control. What do you want? I want what I deserve. Here's the deal, Mom. Take the plea deal. Plead guilty. Serve your 18 months. And sign over $1 million from your estate to me as reparations for the emotional abuse you inflicted. Do that, and I keep Dad's documents private. His reputation stays intact. You keep the rest of your money. Marcus keeps his kids. Everyone wins. And if I don't? Then I released these documents to the FBI. They'll see that Dad was Frank's partner. Your entire fortune gets seized as proceeds of fraud. Dad's name becomes synonymous with corporate crime. Marcus gets nothing. You probably get charged with benefiting from criminal proceeds. You'll die in prison with nothing, and Dad will be remembered as a thief. She paused. You have 48 hours to decide, Mom. Clock's ticking. She hung up. I sat in my apartment, holding my phone, and felt the last piece of hope die inside me. Bryn had won. She'd completely and utterly won. I had no good choices left. Every path led to destruction. Accept the plea and lose everything. Fight and lose even more. I was 65 years old, sick, poor, and cornered. My daughter held every card, and I couldn't see any way out. For the next 48 hours, I existed in a fog of despair. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think straight. My heart palpitations got so bad that I thought several times I might actually be having a heart attack. But I refused to go to the hospital. What was the point? I reviewed my options over and over, but there were no good answers. If I took the plea deal, I'd go to prison, give Bryn $1 million, and live the rest of my life with a criminal record. If I fought, Bryn would release Gerald's documents, and I'd lose everything anyway. If I did nothing, I'd face trial, and probably lose. Every path ended in destruction. Marcus called from Arizona. His custody hearing was tomorrow. He was terrified. Mom, I don't know what to do. My lawyer says Sandra's case is strong because of Bryn's affidavit and your federal charges. He says I might really lose custody. I tried to be strong for him. You'll get through this. Just tell the truth. The judge will see you're a good father. But I didn't believe my own words. I'd learned that the truth didn't matter. What mattered was what people believed. And right now, everyone believed I was a criminal and an abuser. After I hung up with Marcus, I sat in my apartment surrounded by boxes. I still hadn't fully unpacked. I'd moved 2 months ago, but I hadn't had the energy to make this place feel like home. Why bother? I was about to lose everything anyway. I found myself going through one of the boxes. It was filled with photographs and personal items from my old house. Pictures of Gerald and me on vacation. Pictures of Bryn and Marcus as children. Pieces of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. At the bottom of the box, I found a photograph of Gerald taken 6 months before he died. He looked thin in the photo, worried. I remembered that period. He'd been stressed about something at work. He wouldn't talk about it. I'd asked him several times if everything was okay, but he'd always said it was fine, just normal business pressure. Then I remembered something else. Something I'd completely forgotten in the chaos of his death and the past 2 years. 2 weeks before Gerald died, he'd pulled me aside one evening. We'd been watching television, and during a commercial break, he'd muted the TV and turned to me. His face was serious. Tara, if anything ever happens to me, there's something you need to know. I have a safe deposit box at First National, box 847. The key is hidden in my desk drawer, taped under the bottom of the pencil holder. If I die unexpectedly, I need you to go to that box. It's important. I'd asked him what was in it, but he'd shaken his head. Let's hope you never have to find out. But if something happens, promise me you'll go to that box. I'd promised. Then he'd died 2 weeks later, suddenly, and in the grief and chaos of funeral arrangements and estate settlement, I'd completely forgotten about it. The safe deposit box had sat there, untouched, for 2 years. Until now, I sat up straight. Box 847. The same number as the hotel room in the anonymous email. That couldn't be a coincidence. I called Marcus immediately. I just remembered something. Your dad had a safe deposit box I never opened. He told me about it right before he died. We need to open it. Mom, it's 11 at night. The bank isn't open. First thing tomorrow morning. Can you be there? My custody hearing is tomorrow afternoon. I don't know if I have time. Marcus, please. This might be important. Your dad specifically told me to open it if anything happened to him. Box 847. There was silence. 8:47. That's the same number as the hotel room. I know. I'll be there. I'll catch the first flight in the morning. That night, I barely slept. But it wasn't the anxious insomnia I'd been experiencing for months. This was different. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A spark of hope. Maybe. Just maybe. Marcus arrived at 7 in the morning. We went straight to First National Bank. I still had the key to Gerald's desk from my old house. The desk itself was in storage, but I'd kept the key. We drove to the storage unit, found the desk, and there it was, taped under the bottom of the pencil holder, a small safe deposit box key. We drove to the bank and arrived right when it opened at 9. The bank manager, a woman I'd met a few times during estate settlement, greeted us and escorted us to the vault. Box 847. She used her key, and my key, to open it. Inside was a thick manila envelope, a USB drive, and a smaller envelope labeled, "For Bryn, but read my letter first." My hands were shaking as I opened the large envelope. Inside was a letter, dated 2 weeks before Gerald's death. His handwriting. Definitely authentic. I started reading. My vision blurred with tears. Marcus read over my shoulder. Gerald's letter explained everything. He had discovered Frank's embezzlement 6 months before his death. Frank had been forging Gerald's signature and using his credentials for fraudulent transactions. Gerald had confronted Frank, who'd begged for time to fix his mistakes. Gerald, too trusting, had given him 2 weeks. But during those 2 weeks, Gerald realized Frank wasn't fixing anything. He was accelerating the fraud and setting Gerald up to take the fall. Frank was creating false documents that made it look like Gerald was his partner, not his victim. So Gerald started documenting everything secretly. He recorded phone conversations with Frank. He saved emails. He created a parallel set of accounting records, proving exactly what Frank had stolen and when. He was planning to go to the FBI the Monday after he died. But the heart attack happened on Saturday. He never made it to Monday. The letter continued. If you're reading this, I didn't make it to Monday. Everything you need to prove Frank's guilt and my innocence is on the USB drive. Don't let him destroy my name, Tara. I tried to do the right thing. I tried to expose him. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I didn't want to worry you until I was sure. I love you. Always have, always will, Gerald. Marcus and I rushed back to my apartment with the USB drive. We plugged it into his laptop. Hundreds of files appeared, recorded phone conversations where Frank admitted to forging Gerald's signature, emails showing Frank's fraudulent wire transfers, accounting spreadsheets with Gerald's handwritten notes detailing each fraudulent transaction and when he discovered it. A complete timeline proving Gerald had only discovered the fraud 6 months before his death. This proved Gerald's innocence completely. The letter continued with more. About Bryn's trust fund. I need to explain. 6 months before I discovered Frank's fraud, I discovered something else about Bryn. She has a gambling problem. A serious one. She owed $80,000 to some very dangerous people. People who were threatening her. She begged me not to tell you. She said she'd handle it. But I couldn't risk her safety. I paid off her debts. Then I set up an irrevocable trust to give her security while preventing her from draining it all at once on gambling. I never told you because I was ashamed. Ashamed that I'd failed as a father. Ashamed that I'd raised a daughter who fell into that trap. Ashamed that I had to hide this from you. I'm sorry, Tara. The offshore attorney has all the documentation proving you knew nothing about the trust. His contact information is on the USB drive. I opened the smaller envelope labeled for Bryn. Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000 and a short letter. Gerald had written, Bryn, this is for emergencies only. I love you, but I won't enable your gambling anymore. The trust will give you a comfortable life if you let it work for you. Please get help. Please be better than this. You're capable of so much more. Love, Dad. The check had never been cashed. Bryn had never opened this box. She'd never known it existed. I had everything I needed now. Proof of Gerald's innocence. Explanation for the secret trust. evidence to clear myself, but I still needed to prove Bryn's involvement with Frank. I looked at Marcus's photos from Dallas again. Something caught my eye. In one photo, visible through the hotel room window, there was a distinctive clock tower. I knew Dallas well enough to recognize it. That was the old courthouse clock tower, but it was only visible from certain buildings at certain angles. I pulled up a map online. The Dallas Hilton downtown was 6 blocks from that courthouse. The angle was completely wrong. You couldn't see that clock tower from the Hilton. Marcus, where exactly did you take these photos? He looked confused. The Hilton downtown, room 847, like the email said. Are you absolutely sure? He paused, thinking. Actually, I went to the Hilton first, but room 847 was occupied by a family from Iowa. I was confused. Then I got another email from the same anonymous sender saying, "Wrong Hilton, sorry. Hilton Garden Inn, room 403. So I went there instead. That's where I found them." You got a second email? You didn't mention that. I didn't think it mattered. The anonymous person just made a mistake about which hotel. But it wasn't a mistake. Someone had deliberately led us on a trail. First to the wrong room number, 847, which matched Gerald's safe deposit box. Then to the correct location where we'd find Bryn meeting with Frank. Someone wanted us to find that safe deposit box. Someone wanted us to discover the evidence Gerald had collected. Someone who knew about the box and knew Bryn was working with Frank. Only one person fit. Frank himself. Frank had sent those anonymous emails. But why would he expose Bryn? Then it clicked. After Bryn stole the FBI money and wired the clean bills overseas, she must have approached Frank. She probably offered to help him escape prosecution in exchange for a cut of his hidden money. But then Bryn had tried to blackmail him. She'd shown Frank those forged documents claiming Gerald was Frank's partner. She'd threatened to expose Frank if he didn't pay her. But Frank knew those documents were forgeries. He knew Gerald hadn't been his partner. Gerald had been trying to expose him. And Frank realized Bryn was a dangerous liability. Greedy, unpredictable, unstable. So Frank decided to eliminate her as a threat by exposing her to the FBI. The anonymous emails were Frank's revenge and self-preservation. I grabbed my phone and called Agent Morrison. "I need to meet with you immediately. I have evidence about Frank Holloway and about my daughter. I think I can give you both of them." Agent Morrison came to my apartment that afternoon with another agent. I'd prepared everything. Gerald's USB drive, the letter, the photos Marcus had taken, the timeline I'd constructed showing how everything connected. I explained it all carefully. Gerald had been innocent, trying to expose Frank. The USB drive proved it comprehensively. Frank had been working alone, forging Gerald's signature, setting him up. Bryn had found forged documents after Gerald's death and used them to blackmail me, not knowing they were fake. Then Bryn had stolen the FBI's money, sorted the clean bills from the marked ones, and approached Frank with a partnership offer. When Frank refused or didn't pay enough, Bryn tried to blackmail him too. That's when Frank turned on her. Morrison listened carefully, taking notes. He examined Gerald's evidence. The recorded phone calls were damning. Frank's voice, clear as day, admitting to forging signatures and transferring funds without authorization. The emails were even worse. Frank bragging to someone about how he'd set up Gerald to take the fall. "Mrs. Sullivan, how did you get photographs of your daughter meeting Frank?" An anonymous email told me where to find them. I believe Frank sent it. My son went to Dallas and took the photos. Morrison made a call. Within an hour, 2 more agents arrived. They took everything I had. Gerald's USB drive, copies of the photos, everything. Over the next 72 hours, everything moved fast. The FBI analyzed Gerald's evidence. They verified the authenticity of the recordings and emails. They matched Gerald's handwriting on the accounting documents. Everything checked out. Gerald had been innocent. He'd been trying to expose Frank. They investigated Jordan, Derek's FBI cousin, more thoroughly. Under renewed pressure and facing potential charges himself for not reporting Derek's inquiries, Jordan finally admitted the truth. Derek had called him several times asking hypothetical questions about how the FBI tracks money in sting operations. Jordan had thought it was just idle curiosity. He hadn't connected it to any active case. But he'd answered Derek's questions. That was enough to establish how Derek and Bryn knew which bills were marked. The FBI set up surveillance on both Bryn and Frank. They traced the international wire transfers back to accounts Bryn and Derek had opened using shell companies. The paper trail was clear. They discovered Bryn and Derek had booked flights to Mexico, leaving in 3 days. They planned to flee the country. 72 hours after my meeting with Morrison, Bryn and Derek were arrested at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. They were trying to board a flight to Cabo San Lucas. They had fake passports, $50,000 in cash, and one-way tickets. Frank was arrested simultaneously at a private airfield outside Houston, trying to flee to Canada in a small plane. Jordan was arrested at his home for unauthorized disclosure of law enforcement information. All 4 were charged with multiple federal crimes. Patrick called me the next day. "Tara, all charges against you have been dropped. The prosecutor issued a formal apology. Your assets are being unfrozen immediately. The FBI is releasing a statement clearing both you and Gerald's names." I sat down on my couch and cried. Not sad tears. Relief. Pure relief. Within a week, my life started changing. The local newspaper ran a correction with the headline, "Widow Cleared, After Daughter's Fraud Scheme Exposed." The article detailed how Bryn had fabricated evidence, filed false abuse claims, and conspired with Frank Holloway. The country club that had revoked my membership called. Helen Patterson's voice was syrupy sweet now. "Tara, the board has reconsidered. We'd love to reinstate your membership. We're so sorry for the misunderstanding." I declined. I didn't want to be part of a club that had abandoned me so easily. My financial advisor called, offering to take me back as a client. I declined that too. I found a new advisor who specialized in working with fraud victims. 2 of my 3 former friends reached out with apologies. I accepted their apologies but declined their invitations to reconnect. The friend who'd truly stuck by me, who'd never wavered, became closer than ever. Marcus called from Arizona with good news. "Mom, Sandra dropped the custody case. Her lawyer withdrew everything. The judge dismissed it. I keep full custody." The relief in his voice made me cry again. Patrick filed motions to have my arrest record expunged. He filed for return of the bail money. He also helped me file a lawsuit against Bryn for defamation, seeking damages for the false abuse allegations. 6 months after my arrest, all 4 defendants pleaded guilty. The evidence against them was overwhelming. None of them wanted to risk trial. Frank Holloway was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison for fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. Bryn was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for theft of government property, wire fraud, conspiracy, and making false statements to federal investigators. Derek received 12 years for conspiracy, wire fraud, and aiding and abetting. Jordan got 3 years and permanent dismissal from the FBI for unauthorized disclosure of law enforcement information. The government seized all of Frank's hidden assets, including millions in offshore accounts. As Gerald's widow and victim, I received a restitution payment of $4 million. Combined with my original $23 million, now unfrozen, I had $27 million. The $11 million Bryn had wire transferred, was recovered, and returned to the FBI. 1 year after the nightmare began, I did something I'd dreamed about for months. I broke ground on a new house, but it wasn't what I'd originally planned. I bought 20 acres in the hill country of Texas. Beautiful rolling land with oak trees and a small creek. I designed a family compound. A main house for myself, simple and elegant, filled with light and windows overlooking the hills. A second house for Marcus and his kids, close enough for daily visits but far enough for privacy. A guest house for friends who'd proven themselves real. I hired architects. I hired builders. I was involved in every decision. This house would be built on truth, not secrets. On love, not obligation. I also established the Gerald Sullivan Foundation for Fraud Victims. I endowed it with $5 million. The foundation provides free legal assistance and counseling to families affected by corporate fraud. It helps victims navigate the complex federal system. It offers support groups and financial education. Gerald's name would be remembered for trying to do the right thing, not for being a victim or a criminal. Before Bryn's sentencing, she was allowed family visits. Patrick advised against going, but I went anyway. I needed to say what needed to be said. The prison visiting room was cold and institutional. Bryn came in wearing an orange jumpsuit. She looked smaller somehow, tired. The arrogance was gone. She sat down across from me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "I suppose you're here to gloat," she said finally. "No. I'm here because you're still my daughter. Even though you tried to destroy me. Dad always loved you more. Marcus was the golden child. I was never good enough." "That's not true, Bryn. But you believed it. And that belief poisoned you. Your dad left you that trust fund because he loved you. He was trying to save you from yourself, from your gambling problem." Her eyes widened slightly. "How did you know about that?" "He left me a letter. He explained everything. He was ashamed he couldn't help you more. He was ashamed he had to hide it from me. But he loved you, Bryn. He was trying to protect you." Tears rolled down her face. "I didn't want to be saved. I wanted to be chosen. You were always chosen. You just couldn't see it." I stood up. "I hope someday you find peace with yourself. I hope prison gives you time to figure out who you really are. I won't be writing. I won't be visiting again. I've said what I needed to say. Goodbye, Bryn." I walked out of that visiting room and cried in the parking lot. But I didn't regret going. I'd needed to say goodbye to who Bryn was, or could have been. 2 years after everything began, I'm 67 now. I'm healthier than I was during the nightmare. I've gained back the weight I lost. My heart condition is managed with medication and much lower stress. My hair has more gray, but my eyes are clear. I sit on the porch of my dream house on a warm afternoon in May. The hill country spreads out before me, green and beautiful. Marcus's kids, now 10 and 13, are fishing at the pond Marcus stocked last month. Marcus is grilling burgers, laughing at something his daughter said. My real friend Sarah is visiting for the weekend, sitting beside me with a glass of iced tea. The garden Gerald would have loved blooms in front of the house, roses and lavender and herbs. People ask me if I forgive Bryn. I tell them I'm working on it. Forgiveness isn't an event, it's a process. Some days I'm closer than others. What I learned through all of this is that the darkest moment really is right before the dawn. When I was sitting in that apartment with 48 hours to decide my fate, I thought my life was over. I was ready to give up. But that's when I remembered Gerald's safe deposit box. That's when everything changed. Sometimes the answer you need is right in front of you, but you can't see it through the panic and pain. Sometimes you have to sit in the darkness long enough for your eyes to adjust. I also learned that family isn't defined by blood. Marcus proved his loyalty when it cost him something. My real friends revealed themselves by staying when everyone else fled. That's family. And I learned that truth is patient. It doesn't rush. It waits. Frank's fraud, Bryn's lies, Derek's corruption, all unraveled in their own time. Not on my schedule, but on truth's schedule. Justice isn't always fast, but it's thorough. That $20 million trap served its purpose in the end, just not the way I planned. I thought I was trapping Bryn to teach her a lesson. Instead, I ended up in my own trap, and the only way out was through Gerald's truth. That money, the marked bills, the federal investigation, it exposed everyone's true nature. Frank's criminality, Bryn's greed, Derek's corruption, but also Gerald's integrity and Marcus's love. I joke now that it was the best $20 million I never spent because it bought me the truth. And truth, I've learned, is worth more than any fortune. I still think about Bryn sometimes. She'll be eligible for parole in about 8 years. I don't know if I'll be there when she gets out. I don't know if she'll want me there, but I'm at peace with it. I did everything I could as a mother. I loved her. I set boundaries. I tried to teach her right from wrong. Her choices were her own. What I have now is what really matters. Integrity, peace, family that actually deserves the name, and a home built on truth instead of lies. Someone asked me recently if I'd do anything differently. I thought about it for a long time. You know what? I don't think I would. Because every terrible moment led me here, to this porch, this peace, this clarity about what actually matters. They say money can't buy happiness. That's true, but I'll tell you what it can buy. Freedom. Freedom from fear. Freedom to be generous. Freedom to build something meaningful. And that $20 million trap bought me the most expensive and valuable lesson of my life. That the people who truly love you don't need to steal from you. They just need to show up. I thought I'd lost everything. My money, my name, my daughter, my health. But I'd really lost nothing except my illusions. And what I gained was clarity about what actually matters. The sun sets over the hill country, painting the sky orange and pink. I close my eyes, breathe deeply, and feel genuinely, completely at peace for the first time in years. This life, this peace, this clarity, it was worth fighting for. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Someone you never thought would hurt you? How did you find your way back to trusting again? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story touched you or made you think about trust and family in a new way, please hit that like button. It helps others find this story too. And if you want to hear more stories about overcoming impossible situations and finding strength you didn't know you had, subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that even in the darkest moments, there's always hope. There's always a way forward. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here with me through every twist and turn. I hope wherever you are right now, you're finding your own peace, you're building your own truth, and you're surrounded by people who show up for you when it matters. Until next time, remember that truth is patient and justice, though sometimes slow, always finds its way home.